Welcome to Gaining Vision. I'm Melanie. Thanks so much for clicking. To my returning family, the Visionaries, thank you for your continuous love and support. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please feel at home. Have you had an opportunity to subscribe to the channel yet? If not, take a second, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to like and share. Have you been paying attention to what's happening in South Africa on the political front? Many of the political parties are unveiling their manifestos for the upcoming election on May 29th of this year. There's so many out there, there's so many political parties and so many manifestos, but today I thought I would dive in a little bit, just a little bit, into the top 3 political parties' manifestos as they were launched in February, and talk a little bit about my perspective of what they contain. Now, yes, honestly, I've listened to them, all the presentations, watched the events, and I've even read the manifestos. Many South Africans, in fact, told me I was crazy. Why would you do that? But I really wanted to understand what goes into a manifesto. So first, let's start off. What is a manifesto? A manifesto is when a political party has the opportunity to present to the public, the voting public, what their policies will be if they are voted into office. It can be simplistic, it can be detailed, whatever it is they want people to hear before they make their decision of who they're going to vote for. So I'm going to go through 3 political parties in the order of the way they were launched, starting with the EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, who launched their manifesto on February 10th in KZN. Then I'm going to move on to the DA, Democratic Alliance, who launched their manifesto on February 17th in Pretoria at Union Buildings, and then again, thirdly, the ANC, who launched their manifesto on February 24th in KZN as well. So we're going to just do a high overview, highlighting a few points for each manifesto and give you some insight from my perspective. So let's get to it. Let's start with the EFF. Now, first things first, we can talk about all the events, preparation, what went into preparing for it, the event, how much entertainment was there. It was hot, there was load shedding. Some of the EFF members weren't feeling great, including Julius Malema, and how many people attended. But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on what's in the manifesto. So listening to Julius Malema present his perspective of what the EFF has come to for the manifesto was very detailed. Now, if you haven't read it, it's 265 pages in length, and it's very detailed. Now, if you remember, in leading up to this, the EFF went around province to province holding people manifesto meetings, listening to what the people on the ground really wanted. And this manifesto reflects the fact that they were listening, because they cover everything that was mentioned. And I'm talking about everything. So I'm not going to go through all of it because we'd be here for days just on that manifesto. I'm going to talk about what Julius Malema talked about as the 3 main points for the manifesto, and then I'm going to add a few points that I think are very interesting. So the EFF's tagline or focus is land, jobs now, and end load shedding. Makes sense. These are 3 very big issues in South Africa at this time. The EFF talks about land, and we know they've been big advocates for the reappropriation of land without compensation for years. So it wasn't surprised that this was one of their big focus. But as I read the manifesto, I was really informed. It clearly outlines what they're talking about it. So yes, they want equal land opportunities for everybody in South Africa. They talk about how they're going to change the Constitution, or how they're suggesting it. Section 25, and they even put in how they would rephrase it into it to ensure that everybody in South Africa would have free, fair distribution of land for their own personal and business use. So it's great to know that's one of the focus. They also talk about how they're going to also look at how internationals can purchase land in South Africa and the limit to how much land a person can own. They talk about how within 5 years, 50% of the land will be given to Black Africans. This goes into great detail, and I encourage you to read this section of the manifesto. But why is this important? Well, we know Julius Malema has said many times that without land, there's no dignity. Think about it. When you own land, you have somewhere to go and feel proud that you own it. You also have that as an asset when you go to somebody, whether it's to the bank to look for credit or a loan, but also it gives a legacy for the family. Land means so much more, and so I think this is a vital area. Now we know that this is also a very sensitive topic for many South Africans, but the EFF has clearly outlined how it will be fairly distributed, so everybody will be included and everybody will have access to land. The second point they focus about is about unemployment and the jobs. Right now, unemployment is at a high in South Africa, and they really wanted to address this, and not just superficial. What I was impressed was how Julius Malema outlined how the manifesto was written, how they're going to address and tackle this huge issue. Right now, South Africa has many tenders, so many private companies come in, bid for the contracts, and they do the work. The EFF is proposing that instead of that, they're not going to have tenures, they're not going to do catered deployment, they're going to have people hired by the state, by the government, to work in certain areas, such as the roads, such as creating housing, other infrastructure areas, so that they're doing the jobs through the government. So it's not about if the contractor does the work and who's following up. If they're working for the government, this is a huge possibility. That not only will they create 9 million jobs in this opportunity, but they'll be able to focus on if the jobs are being done correctly and properly. They also talk about other areas for employment, including with education, how they're going to be introducing early childhood development, where children will start to go to school at the age of 3. So that will open up lots of opportunity for trained educators for these roles, other potential employment opportunities. They also addressed how right now all the security jobs are all done by private contracts. So why not hire people from as security guards through the government? This would also create more jobs. But he didn't just stop there. The EFF has also outlined a clear industrialization plan to help increase and encourage Africans to definitely get back into producing items in South Africa for South Africans. Instead of exporting and importing, they want people to start creating factories here in South Africa, especially in the rural areas, hiring people to create jobs and producing products here in South Africa to help South Africans buy South African, as well as other African countries on the continent. They have incentives, including if somebody is to open a factory and hire 2,000 people that will have minimum wage and security with benefits, there will be an incentive for that owner. So this is encouraging people to definitely open up those factories in the rural areas where there's such a need. They've addressed employment very detailed, and what I really appreciated is they have timelines in their manifesto. They tell you how they're going to do it and why. The third point that they were talking about was load shedding and how they're going to end load shedding. Now, this has been a hot topic in South Africa, and it's been going on for years, and yet it doesn't seem to have a solution. Now, if you recall back in the manifesto of 2013 for the EFF, their very first manifesto, they had an outlined plan of how to end load shedding, and it's still vital today. The difference was Julius Malema mentioned that they've put together a team of engineers that are trained and ready to join Eskom if they're elected to power, and they've committed to ending load shedding within the first 6 months of taking power in office. I know a lot of people don't think this is possible and that there's no way this can happen, but the reality is, if you read the manifesto, they've clearly outlined a plan and how not only will it encourage people to create more jobs, but also it's going to see that there are the resources here if only they're managed properly. Load shedding is something that is important to everybody in South Africa because it impacts jobs, security, as well as well-being of everybody at home. Now, those are the three main areas the EFF are talking about, but as I mentioned, this manifesto is action-packed with so much more. A few points that I just wanted to highlight that I found interesting was, of course, education. EFF is always talking about free education, and in this manifesto, they talk about how that's possible, the importance of having education for all, from a young age, as I mentioned, early childhood development, right up to varsity, which is university, post-secondary. They talk about the importance of ensuring that all schools have flushing toilets inside, they have sports field and other resources that they desperately need. And then the final point on this, before I get into how is this all going to work, is the social grants. Now we know currently South Africans that are not working get 350 rands per month. Well, the EFF is suggesting they're going to double the grants, whether it's a seniors grant, persons with disabilities grant, somebody who's not working, and other social grants that are out there. But they don't stop there. They talk about how everybody who's educated will get money for being educated. If you complete your metrics, go on to varsity, you get your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD, every level will have funds. Now, I've heard a lot of pushback on this because a lot of people are saying, that's not possible. How can you promise this? There's not going to be enough money. How are you going to pay for it? But if you look at the whole manifesto, you see how they're really focusing on unemployment. Most people will have jobs, so there'll be no need for those grants for people that are working. So that'll cut back a lot of the costs. Plus, we know that there is a lot of money that is being misused within the government. The EFF has pointed out several times that could be redistributed appropriately. As you know, many South Africans count on these social grants. So this is something that many South Africans take the time and feel a little breath in knowing that that's a possibility. So let's look at this EFF manifesto. Yes, it's long. Yes, it's detailed. Yes, many people feel it's a pie in the sky ideas. But what I want people to really take time to listen to is the fact that this is a big vision. This is something that would be amazing if it was put into fruition. So yes, perhaps EFF are visionaries, but it's not impossible. Everything is possible with the right people, and that's the other thing that EFF talks about, is putting the right people in the right positions to make it happen. And I encourage you to take time to read this manifesto and make your own decisions. But don't think of it as just a pie in the sky. Think of it, wouldn't this be amazing if this actually happened? Wow, that was EFF. Now we're going to move on to the DA. So Democratic Alliance was a lot more short, to the point, 7 points that they talk about. Of course, employment, healthcare, education, and corruption. They talk about crime and how all of this is going to be happening. But the thing that I noticed is that other than the fact they talk a lot about privatization, there was no talk about the land and really no details of how they're going to actually accomplish what they're saying. They didn't give any specific dates or timelines. They just said what they were going to do. Now, what's different, not only about their manifesto in the written format, is actually the event as well. They chose not to do it in a stadium. They chose to do it at the Union buildings. I thought that was very, very subliminal, let's say. They said they're going to get to this Union buildings, and they did their manifesto there to really get people to think that. It was a big event. Lots of people attended. In fact, we drove by when it was going on, and there was a fair amount of people. But what I noticed that was different was that it was just a lot of talking. You know, I think the other manifestos, there's a lot of energy. But this particular one, I found it was just more talk than anything else. That's just my perspective. But again, I encourage you to look at it. Find out, is it really got the meat that the EFF one had? And the NC, you want to compare all three, because before you make an educated decision, you have to read them all. And I know that means going through and reading it. But it is clearly outlined, and the DA definitely has an outline as an opposition party, and they are determined to keep that opposition role. So we'll wait and see what happens. But I encourage you to check out the Democratic Alliance's manifesto as well. Now, of course, leaving ANC to last, well, not only because of the launching order, but also because they are the party in power right now. As I listened to what Ramaphosa was saying as he was doing the event, I thought it sounds really familiar to a lot of the topics EFF was talking about. The difference, though, was they weren't giving any big commitments. They weren't making any dates and promises. They weren't giving a lot of numbers. They were saying, we're going to address this, we're going to address that. And after reading it, I understood why. The last manifesto they did, the last election, they had a lot of promises. And if you go back and you look at them and the dates, not everything was completed. So this time, I think they're taking a different approach of saying, look at what we've done over 30 years, and now we're going to do this. My personal perspective was, okay, you had 30 years, why didn't you do that already? But hey, that's just my perspective. So again, a lot of information talks about a lot of things. The one part I kind of giggled to myself, to be honest, is when they addressed corruption. Yes, all of them are addressing corruption, but they're in power. They're the ones that are corrupt. So come on. I don't know, just my take on that. Again, I am going to say this though. What I did like about the ANCY's manifesto was the inclusiveness of the event. Yes, okay, the difference was EFF only had people from KZN and ANC had people coming from all the provinces to attend. But when I meant inclusiveness is that everybody was together, talking, celebrating, and everybody was happy. Now, we know that ANCYL has the funds, they can get people there, they can feed them, they can give freebies, and all of that is fine. And all political parties are going to do that. But what I was disappointed about all of these manifesto launches is they're spending all of this money on these manifestos. Yes, they're important. Yes, it's election time. It's time to get in front of people. But shouldn't that money be used for providing service delivery? Just saying. On a whole, manifestos are continue to unveil, including MK Party and others coming in March. But I encourage everybody before, especially if you're in South Africa, before you go to the voting polls, take time, read them, really listen to what they're saying, read between the lines, and go out and ask questions. If you don't see what you want, ask why it's not there. All of these parties, the three of them are the main ones, and that's why I focused on them today. But of course, there are other political parties that have already launched, and I encourage you to go back and look at those as well. Until next time, I'd love for you to have a conversation with me on this. What are your thoughts on the manifestos that have been put out so far? Drop your comments below. Let's have a conversation. And definitely keep watching. Do your research. Take the time. And definitely keep me posted on anything you see coming down the line. And please don't forget to hit that notification button, like and share, and we'll see you later. Bye.